All right. You make a deep topic to start. True, Eggy. True. Actually, we'll do the graph later. Give me a percentage on average. What is the... Okay. I'm just gonna say this. On average, what is the cost percentage for a company to employ a minimum wage worker? Exclude top 100 richest companies. Keep the lower, keep the upper end from being skewed. Estimated cost percentage of a company to employ a minimum wage worker, excluding the top 100 richest companies, is tricky because direct data on this specific subset is sparse. Wait, what? And costs may vary widely by industry location. Okay. According to the Employment Politics Institute, about 50% of minimum wage workers are employed by businesses with fewer than 100 employees, and 40% work at businesses with fewer than 50 employees. These are typically small retail services or hospitality businesses like diners, grocery stores, or franchises. I would say that there's an extent to which, since slaves were assets, they were treated in a way to maximize capital values of the slave. In contrast, minimum wage employees have high turnover, so there's no point in maximizing the long-term value of the worker over the immediate use value. Exactly, Levi. A slave is an investment. A minimum wage worker is, what's the word? I would say like a cog, like a pin, like I don't know if there's a really good word for that. That said, it's very rare for employers to flog their employees. That's another thing true, Levi. If you want to talk the life of a slave versus the life of a minimum wage worker, yeah, no, not comparison, man. My manager telling me not to lean on the counter is not the same as getting 10 lashes. or the whole being a barista and being misgendered is not the same as having your hand cut off. Okay, let's just say, like...
10 lashes? Massa is kind to you, sir.
If you're leaning on the counter, you only get 10 lashes. For failing to smile, you get 39. Okay. On average, for small to mid-sized companies, excluding the top richest, the additional cost of employing a minimum wage worker beyond their base wage is approximately... If you meant cost as a percentage of company revenue, it's like 20 to 40% for labor. In intensive industries like hospitality, but this varies widely. Okay, I guess that's actually a better way to put it. It's like, what is the labor cost? And then we can kind of extrapolate. Like, I'd say the lower 40%, right? So if their total revenue is $200 million, and they have, let's say, 2,000 minimum wage employees. No, I don't think that math works. I think that's a much larger number than that, with a like a much smaller differential. So if the labor cost of a company per year is around 40%, if assuming 60% of those workers are minimum wage, and that accounts for roughly 40% of the total employee labor costs. What would the final percentage of labor be for Okay, I think that's a good way to word it. Calculate the percentage of a company's total labor costs attributed to minimum wage workers. Let's break down the information provided. Total labor costs 40% of the company's annual budget. Minimum wage workers 60% of the workforce. Minimum wage labor costs 40% of the total employee labor costs. Total labor costs. Let's denote the company's total annual budget or revenue as 100%. If labor costs are 40% of the company's budget, then total budget costs 40% of the budget. Minimum wage 40%. The total labor cost of 40%. Total labor cost 16% of the company's total budget. Final answer. Labor costs for minimum wage workers is approximately 16% of the company's total budget. This assumes the 40% labor cost refers to the company's overall budget or revenue. This is called business financials. What I'd look at would cost per worker per hour adjusted for inflation and whatnot. But I mean, like, I think it's easier to do percentages and say, you know, what is the average. And I think 16% is pretty good. Like, 16% of your total budget goes to minimum wage employees for, like, large companies. I think that's actually pretty reasonable. Because the higher up the chain you go, the more money those people are making. And some people are probably making, like in the CEO area, like millions of dollars a year, right? It's my own song. Archie Lewis. Welcome, welcome. How's it going? Thank you for communicating on YouTube. Not a lot of people talk on YouTube, but apparently they have been lately. So I'm really appreciated to see someone on YouTube. Although all lurkers are welcome, man. That is why we have... Or is it... Wait. There you go, lurkers. Productive output per worker has increased very dramatically since slavery. Yeah, Levi, like, there's so many other factors that I'm not even gonna bother with that. I just want, like, the gist of an idea of the financial value of a minimum wage worker versus a slave. And I'm gonna tie this all back to the fact that, like, this is so, like, people vote against their own worst interest, right? And we're either gonna get UBI or we're gonna get slavery. Those are basically, or the world's gonna blow up. Like those are like the three possible outcomes of our timeline currently. The song is called Archie Lewis, Break the Signal. Let's see. Okay, let's compare. Okay, no, okay, what percentage? Okay, let's just say how much did it cost to own a slave on average? There. We'll just start with that and then we'll move our way up with it. Just the cost of owning a slave historically. I'll focus on the antebellum United States, pre-Civil War. Specify a time period. $1850. Because I wanted to be like pretty much as close as you could get, right? Okay, so how are we gonna word this? What percentage of the total wealth of a company or a family that owned hundreds of slaves? What percentage of the total wealth did it cost for a company or a family that owned hundreds of slaves? Same. I'm not even going to compare it. It's just, we can leave it at that. We're good. Percentage total wealth required to own hundreds of slaves for a company or family. I'll focus on historical revenue. Studies estimate that slaves constitute 40 to 60% of a planter's total wealth. But that's not, The earlier questions noted that modern labor costs are 40% of a company's budget, with minimum wage workers, 60% of the workforce, accounting for 16% of the budget. For slaveholders, the upfront cost of slaves, 24 to 60% of wealth, for 100 to 500 slaves, was a massive capital investment. Unlike recurring wage costs, but annual maintenance was far lower than the modern labor costs. Slaves' labor was free after purchase, making the system economically distinct from wage-based labor. Wealth variability. Wealth estimates vary widely, and slaves' value as assets complicates calculation, as they were both a cost and a wealth component. Just cost of slaves represented. So that's just that's roughly what it costs to purchase them. But and then it costs significantly less to take care of them. So could we extrapolate that the total percentage cost of slaves. Well, yeah, it makes sense to compare purchase cost to wealth and upkeep costs to revenue. Okay. This is where we're breaking it down to annual revenue, right? Total percentage cost of slaves per year is proportional to total revenue for a family plantation business owner. Annual cost, maintenance. 10 to 30% of annual revenue. Variability. Amortization, debate, data limitations. For a family or plantation business owning 500 slaves in the antebellum U.S., excluding the top 100 richest entries, maintenance cost alone, 6 to 30% of annual revenue. $12 to 60%. So it actually seems to be like almost exactly the same. It's within like the same margin of error. So you could say that it's actually... It was probably actually more viable to have slaves because like you could teach them specific trade skills and stuff like that, you know? So they would probably have a better education than most minimum wage job. Like if you think about it today, like what you would need a slave to like actually be able to do to function in society. Have very few upfront costs. Exactly. So it's like, and it's like, unless something major happens and you have to like terminate them, there's a lawsuit or something like that, it's like, it's completely within the same level and same scope. So it's like, which one would you rather have? I just think that's really interesting because, like I said, I thought it would be like 100 times cheaper to have a minimum wage worker than it would to have a slave. But it's basically the same.